The latest U.S. sanctions are intended to ratchet up the pressure on Russia as
Western nations prepare to potentially sanction Russia over it. In the meantime, Western governments have agreed to impose more sanctions on Russia. Western nations prepare to potentially sanction Russia over it. Now, our questions.
We've all seen the headlines since 2014. Crushing sanctions, economic isolation. The ruble is rubble. It's the ultimate geopolitical drama where the West plays the stern parent, taking away Russia's toys.
Do we really have to do this again?
I told you once, and I won't tell you again. This is coming with me.
Yes, sir.
But what if I told you that Uncle Sam and his European friends didn't actually break Russia's legs? What if they actually functioned as the world's most expensive, unasked-for personal trainers? Welcome to the Fortress Russia workout, where the workout equipment is high inflation and the protein shake is pure spite. So, it's 2014. Russia takes Crimea, and the West reacts with the ultimate weapon, banning high-end brie and Italian parmesan. The goal? Make the Russian elite cry into their crackers until they give the land back. Instead of a revolution, we got the great import substitution pivot. The Kremlin basically told its people, if you want cheese, go find a cow. Suddenly, Russian farmers who had been ignored for decades became the new rock stars. Russia didn't just survive without French camembert. They became the world's largest exporter of wheat. Fast forward to 2022, and this "we'll do it ourselves" energy hit the big leagues when McDonald's pulled out. Westerners expected a Big Mac famine to trigger a regime change. Instead, we got Vkusno I Tochka, tasty, and that's it. They didn't just take the buildings, they took the supply chains, the fryers, and the employees. Since the American burgers were already 99% Russian beef and buns, the only thing they lost was the logo. By removing the brand, but keeping the calories, the Kremlin proved that the American dream tastes remarkably like local pickles and logistics. By 2022, the nuclear option was triggered. Russia was kicked out of SWIFT. The plan was to turn the Russian economy into a giant, frozen vending machine that doesn't take cards. Surely, without the dollar, they'd collapse. Let's face the truth. Russia had been reading the room since 2014. They built their own payment system, Mir, and started sliding into the DMs of the global south. This wasn't just a rebound, it was a full-on marriage of convenience called BRICS Plus. By trying to weaponize the dollar, the West accidentally gave the rest of the world a really good reason to stop using it. Pulled the plug on SWIFT, thinking that if Russia couldn't use the global banking clubhouse, the whole economy would just evaporate into thin air. It was a bold move, truly. But here's the hard reality. Russia had been practicing for this unplugging since 2014. While the West was patting itself on the back, the Kremlin was busy fluency training in a new language. By bridging their own SPFS system with China's CIPS, they didn't just survive, they pivoted so hard that Russia now speaks yuan with a more natural accent than it ever spoke euro.
不过可以更自然一点。
Then came the asset freezes. The plan was to lock Russia's wallet and throw away the key. But Russia responded with a move that can only be described as economic judo. They simply looked at Europe while the wind was blowing particularly cold and demanded rubles for gas. Suddenly, the very countries that were trying to freeze Russian assets found themselves in a line at the currency exchange, frantically buying rubles just to keep their own heaters from turning into decorative ice sculptures. It turns out you can't really freeze a country that specializes in winters. Finally, we have the G7 price caps, the geopolitical equivalent of telling a shark it's only allowed to eat at a discount. The idea was to limit the profit on Russian oil without actually stopping the flow. But instead of following the rules, Russia assembled the Shadow Fleet. We're talking about a massive, unbranded, and totally not official armada of tankers that basically functions as the world's largest unregistered taxi service for oil. They aren't selling oil to the West anymore. They're just taking a very long, very scenic route through India and China, while the middlemen take a cut, and everyone pretends not to notice. The result? The sanctions didn't stop the machine. They just forced Russia to build a weirder, more spite-driven version of it. So here's the latest from Washington's political sitcom. President Trump has finally decided to greenlight a bipartisan sanctions bill targeting Russia. And not just Russia, but anyone who dares to buy Russian stuff without reading the fine print. Yes, after months of back and forth that could have doubled as a reality show, Trump agreed to let the legislation advance in Congress. You have to admire the timing. Just when everyone thought sanctions were stale news, we get a bill that targets not only Moscow, but also its friends, potentially China, India, and Brazil, unless they behave better than your in-laws at Thanksgiving dinner.
Let's spin the sanctions wheel! China! No one saw that coming!
In the grand tradition of bipartisan cooperation, both sides agreed on one thing. If a country dares to import cheap Russian oil, it might find itself slapped with tariffs so high that even its own economy can't ignore them. It's like charging admission fees to watch someone fuel a war machine. And Trump? Well, he didn't look unhappy about it. Because when you tell the world you're going to punish your rivals with tariffs, sanctions, and enough legislative flourish to fill a filibuster, at least you can say you tried, even if the rest of us are left wondering whether we've just scripted the next geopolitical comedy series. The comprehensive story of Russia since 2014 is not a simple tale of triumph, but rather a masterclass in aggressive adaptation and spite-driven survival. By being forced to fire its long-standing Western addiction, the Kremlin successfully traded German precision for Chinese utility and good-enough domestic alternatives, effectively transforming the nation from a European gas station into a sprawling Eurasian warehouse. These sanctions provided the perfect domestic get-out-of-jail-free card, allowing every local failure to be conveniently blamed on Western aggression, while Russia leaned comfortably into its role as the permanent villain of the global stage. Ultimately, the West attempted to put Russia in a timeout corner, only to realize that Russia is exceptionally good at sitting in corners and nursing a grudge. Instead of a total economic collapse, the world is now facing a more bitter, self-reliant entity obsessed with its own version of store-brand capitalism. I'm Felix Fumble, and in trying to tear down Fortress Russia, the world may have just helped build its walls higher. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more backfired brilliance you definitely didn't ask for.